Well, good afternoon. My name is Nathan Stelter, president here at the Stelter Company. Thanks for joining us for our webinar today. I'll get to introduction in just a quick moment. Did want to say a couple things about the webinar series because as a trusted leader in asset-based giving, we here at the Stelter Company are passionate about supporting nonprofits with fresh ideas and practical guidance. We're proud to help build connections across the sector and are pleased to offer this series of free webinars bringing you experts from across the country to help you unlock new revenue throughout your development portfolio. I'm very excited about our webinar today and our series for 2025, along with Lynn, who I'll introduce in a minute. Some of the presenters and topics on our docket include Delinda Rood and Karen Peel from Mayo Clinic, teaching us how to pivot to turn planned gift inquiries into planned gifts. Steve Clark, AVP at Virginia Tech, is going to do some coaching and provide advice to help equip your colleagues outside of planned giving with skills to produce more leads. And we'll also have Lindy Nash from CCK, along with Jim Langley and others, join us later in the year. Please do keep an eye out on your email for those invitations to register for these, as they will be sent out prior to those events. Now, back to today's webinar. Again, we've got a lot of great content to share, and I have the esteemed pleasure to introduce my friend and colleague, Lynn Gaumer. Lynn is our own senior gift planning consultant here at Stelter. She's been with us forever, but actually only 13 years. Feels like forever in a good way. Advising our clients on technical plan giving matters and ensuring the accuracy of the content and communications that we provide to everybody. She has over 25 years of experience in estate and charitable planning and is very busy these days, not only with her designations at JD and CAP, but she is on the board of directors for our National Association of Charitable Gift Planners, where she's a member of the 2025 Development and Government Relations and Advocacy Committee, which will come in very handy today. And I'm sure we'll be doing some polling and getting some feedback from everybody on the call. And then last year, she had the honor of chairing the NACGP Leadership Institute, which she did for a couple of years. She's also actively involved, current board member and past president of our local Mid-Iowa Plan Giving Council, and authors our amazing Stelter Expert Insights, along with being featured in Plan Giving Today and other areas. Again, great content, a lot of stuff to cover here in just the next 56 minutes. So I'll hand it off to Lynn.
Thank you, Nathan. I appreciate that. And thank you, Jen, for hosting this. So we're going to get started because, as they said, we have a packed agenda. So this webinar is about the key factors impacting philanthropy in 2025, and that includes tax policy, executive actions, and economic conditions. So some experts in the field may expand on that, may say that AI and the great wealth transfer and demographics also play key roles, and I will agree with that. But for this presentation, we're going to focus on these three items. I will say that this is a very fluid topic, and it changes constantly. I have updated this presentation numerous times getting ready for today. So if you are listening to the recording of this, please be mindful that things could change between now and the time that you are listening to the recording. So let's start. We're going to look at tax policy, and we're going to revisit the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. So where we were, where we're at now. And then you've probably heard in the news, One Big Beautiful Bill Act is making its way through Congress. The subtitle of that bill is Make American Families and Workers Thrive Again. It has passed in the House. It has moved on to the Senate. And we're going to go over the provisions as they sit today. And then we're going to go over some executive actions that are also impacting philanthropy and economic conditions. And if you've seen me speak before, I always like to give some homework or also next steps for you. So let's go ahead and get started on tax policy first. So Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, if you're not familiar with it, this is the tax policy that has been in place since 2018. And it really did bring significant changes for individuals, businesses, and nonprofits. What was interesting about this act was that many of the provisions had an expiration date. And that expiration date is December 31st of 2025. So unless Congress acts, the many of these provisions will expire. So Congress has been hard at work trying to either make these provisions permanent or extend them for a certain period of time, or as we're going to see, I think at least one provision that impacts charitable giving will not be extended and will expire at the end of the year. Some of the provisions that will expire unless they are extended are like income tax rates, the standard deduction, and the estate tax exemption. So let's take a look. Here's a chart here of where we were pre-Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. So that was like in 2017 and earlier. Then when the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act was signed in the first Trump administration, uh, the middle column, that's where we have the tax rates. And what was interesting to note as far as the standard deduction, it just about doubled, right? And so we had more people taking that standard deduction than itemizing. So what does the One Big Beautiful Bill Act say? Well, it's going to permanently extend those tax rates. So we're not going to see any changes there. It's just that they are not going to expire at the end of this year. Now, the standard deduction is going to remain high. Right now, it's for 2025, it's $15,000 for single filers and $30,000 for married couples filing jointly. But what this bill does say is that for 3 years, including this year, 2025 through 2028, there's an additional increase of $1,000 for single filers and $2,000 for married filing jointly. So if this provision passes as the current text says, that's what we'll see for the standard deduction. So how did the Tax Cuts and Job Act impact charitable giving? So now we're seeing that things are going to probably be extended and probably be made permanent. So we're going to have that higher standard deduction. We're going to continue with that. So we'll have fewer taxpayers itemizing. And so there's a decreasing in the incentive for charitable deductions there. Only about 9% of people now itemize. So that was a drastic reduction in households taking the itemized deduction from before the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. And it really amounted to about a $20 billion loss for charities, which is concerning. So that's something that we need to be mindful of. But as you'll see in my next slide, something we can focus on. Now, marketing tip. This is Stelter, right? So when you are talking about the charitable deduction in your promotional materials, please remember not to overstate tax benefits. So as I just said, that more individuals will be taking standard deduction now more than ever. And as we move forward here with if this bill gets signed into law. And so it's instead of saying you're going to receive an income tax deduction, because we don't know that. Use phrases like maybe when you itemize, you'll get a charitable deduction, or if you qualify for an income tax deduction. These terms help set realistic expectations and maintain clarity. I know in speaking with federal or financial advisors, they don't like seeing promotional materials that really overstate tax benefits. So be careful with that in your marketing materials. Now, I just wanted to bring you back to 2018, and this is going to stay the same as we move forward here, is when the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act increased that standard deduction, and we saw so many people now taking that standard deduction, a new strategy emerged, and that was called bunching. And at the time, I had not heard of it, but what it did was it basically what donors would do is that they would make multiple years worth of donations in a single tax year, exceed that standard deduction threshold, and then following years, then maybe take the standard deduction. So here's just an example. So let's say a donor typically gave $8,000 a year annually to your organization. They might give $25,000 now every 3 years. So for them, that is helpful from a tax perspective, but from a nonprofit standpoint, I know that it's kind of hard because how do you plan for that, right? So you may see a $25,000 gift and think the same is going to happen in the next year, but really the donor is bunching. So when you see this, it's really important to maintain communications and continue to steward your donors and find out exactly how they're seeing their donations go. So here's a couple things. Now, the cash contributions, I have not found this in the new bill. So pre-Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, the cash contribution was limited to 50% of a person's adjusted gross income, or AGI. The current tax code, what we have with Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, that increased it to 60%. Now, I have not found this in the new bill. I have looked repeatedly, but I have not found it. So what I believe is going to happen is that this provision is going to expire at the end of this year. It does not look like it's going to extend unless the Senate changes that, or as it moves through Congress here, that somehow gets changed. The estate tax deduction will increase again. So when we had the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act in 2017 and prior years, it was 5.49 million. It more than doubled with the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, and now it's at 13.99 million, or just under $28 million for married couples. Now that's going to increase to 15 million for individuals, or $30 million for married couples. Now here's another marketing tip from me. Given these high estate tax exemptions, you do not want to be putting in your promotional materials that, hey, if you make a gift to us in your will or through a beneficiary designation, you will get a federal estate tax deduction. The exemption is so high that only about 0.1 to 0.2% of taxpayers actually are subject to this. So again, do not overstate your tax benefits in your marketing material. Please be mindful that this only applies to very few individuals because of the exemption is so high. So let's get to the $4 trillion question. So the cost to extend Tax Cuts and Jobs Act depends on the source you're looking at, between probably 4 and 5 trillion. And so let's say it's about $4 trillion. How is Congress going to pay for this extension? Well, what's in the bill right now is that it increases the debt ceiling by 4 trillion. So that's one way. But there's also other ways, right? There's going to be increased revenue, tariffs, other provisions impacting not only nonprofits, but other individuals and corporations. And then, of course, decreased spending, right? So maybe federal spending is cut, reduced workforce, DOGE cuts, things like that. So that's how this bill is coming into play. But as it moves into Senate, there's a lot of discussion around, well, maybe Medicaid shouldn't be cut as much, or maybe the debt ceiling shouldn't be that high. So all of those discussions are happening right now in Washington on how to pay for this, for the extension of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. So so here are a few provisions of how the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act is going to get paid for as they impact nonprofits. So the first one I'm going to talk about today is the new tiered tax rates for colleges and universities, and this is the tax on endowments. So they're estimating that the revenue gained from this provision is about $6.9 billion. What it does is that it lowers the threshold for taxation and expands the number of affected universities. So I've laid out the tiered system right here. So just to put it in perspective, the current 1.4% tax applies to about 56 colleges and universities as of 2023. It depends on the source that I'm looking at, but the new tiered system will add maybe 40 to 50, but I've also seen that to be a lot less. So I'm still looking at that, on how many additional colleges and universities will be impacted on this. So we're just going to have to see how this goes and as it moves forward. Increased tax rates for private foundations. So here we have another tiered system. So the current rate is 1.39%. Now we're going to have a tiered system under the current bill, and that's really going to increase the tax rate for a number of private foundations. So just as an example here, the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, for example, paid $14 million in taxes in 2023, but under the new system would pay 103 million on the same amount. So that would impact, of course, nonprofits receiving grants and communities that the Johnson Foundation is supportive. This is just one example, but again, that it trickles down that they'll be paying more tax, but possibly less in grants to organizations. Giving threshold for corporations. This states that corporations must donate at least 1% of their taxable income to qualified charities to maintain eligibility for certain tax deduction. The revenue gained here would be a little over $16 billion. And this seems to be a little mixed from what I'm hearing in the charitable sector, is that for those maybe smaller corporations, they may want to get over that 1% threshold and say, okay, I'm going to now give more because I want to be over that 1% threshold. So they may, they may do that. And so maybe there's some partnerships formed between nonprofits and these maybe smaller or smaller corporations. So there may be some opportunities there for nonprofits to engage with corporations who are seeking to fulfill this requirement. But on the other side of the coin, some people are saying, well, this could create artificial limitations. So for maybe those big corporations, they'll say, oh, well, I'll only give 1% when maybe they've been giving 3% or 5% or whatever they've been giving. So I'm not sure about this one. I have mixed feelings about it. So, but this is what is in the bill. Here are some other tax revenue provisions that are in the current text. So the first one limits the tax benefit of itemized deductions to 35%. So this would impact taxpayers who are in that 37% tax bracket. So for those in the highest tax bracket, they'll only be able to deduct up to 35%. So you have so that would be only, again, for the highest taxpayers. Another one increases unrelated business taxable income for transportation or parking fringe benefits. The revenue gained there is about 2.7 billion. Treating name and logo royalties as unrelated business income. When I first looked at this provision, I immediately thought, oh, this is really going to impact the higher ed sector, right? With their, of course, their names and logos on t-shirts and sweatshirts and jerseys and things like that. But upon reading and diving into this a little bit more, I think the text of the bill is very broad. And so I also believe it's going to affect museums, like their gift shops. So think about if you are a museum and you have your logo on t-shirts and coasters and Christmas ornaments and things like that, I do believe this is going to apply to you. So let's see how this moves forward. But that is also a concerning provision, especially for maybe like smaller museums who really rely on those gift shop purchases. The last one is expanding the tax on excess compensation to apply to all employees earning more than 1 million. Currently, it's capped at 5 employees. So the revenue gained there will be about 3.8 billion. Now, some good news. Revives the universal charitable deduction. Now, I want to give you a little history on this. The universal charitable deduction, the original text of the bill had a lot bigger deduction allowances. So the original text of the bill said an individual could take a deduction, who are who are not itemizing, who are taking that standard deduction. And remember from earlier in the presentation, that's about 90% of the people, right? They're able, so the original text said, oh, it's a third of the standard deduction. So they'll be able to deduct roughly about, $5,000 to $10,000, depending if they're single or married couple. And I thought that was great. Those were good numbers for me. But at the same time, I thought it's not going to go that high. I think it's going to cost the government too much. So I thought it would be less, but I didn't think it was going to be this amount. So the bill currently provides that the limited deduction is capped at $150 for individuals and $30 for joint filers, and it does have an expiration date. It's only good for this year through 2028, and contributions to DAFs are not eligible. The estimated cost to this is 6.9 billion. It was a lot higher when we had the higher numbers, the 1/3 of that standard deduction. Now, before you're a little disappointed, I know I'm a little disappointed, but please remember these are similar numbers to what we had under the CARES Act. And the CARES Act was in 2020 and 2021, and we had universal charitable deduction numbers similar to what this bill says, the $150 and $300 range. About 90 million taxpayers took advantage of this incentive, and it led to an additional $30 billion in charity. After it expired, so you're talking 2022 and beyond, charitable giving declined. So overall giving dropped 1.7% in 2022 compared to 2021. The number of donors declined about 10%. And the largest declines came from donors giving $500 or less, who were taking advantage of the CARES Act. So while I'm disappointed in the amount of it, I'm glad that it's in there. And maybe as we move forward and advocate for the nonprofit sector, we can increase those numbers, hopefully substantially. But at least it's in there. I wish it was more, but that's where it's at right now. Now, this provision was in the original text of the bill. It was taken out on May 18th after some committee meetings. So I do want to emphasize that. But I do want to just let you know that it's still out there and it could still find its way into future legislation. So I'm just bringing you up to date on this. So the proposed change would allow the Secretary of the Treasury to unilaterally revoke the nonprofit status from a terrorist supporting organization. Now, on its face, that sounds like, okay, of course we don't want to support a terrorist supporting organization. But when you look at the text of the bill, what concerns me is that for me, it's a potential abuse of power. The Secretary of Treasury is the only one that can make that decision. It's unilateral. And there's no, on the flip side, from the nonprofit side, it does not allow nonprofits any due process or an evidentiary hearing or to bring it to court. So I really believe that this provision concerns me. Again, this was taken out on May 18th of the current bill, but I don't want to find its way back in. So just letting you know that it's out there, and just know that we need to continue to advocate against this provision. Now, as Nathan mentioned, I am the Government Relations Chair for our Mid-Iowa Plan Giving Council. I am also on the Government Relations Committee for CGP. We want to hear from you. I want to advocate for you. So what I want to know is, what of all the tax provisions that I just went over, what do you believe deserves the most attention from advocacy groups like CGP, like the National Council of Nonprofits and others? So the first one is that non-itemizer charitable deduction. Should we be focusing on increasing that? What about the net investment income tax on colleges and universities? Should we be focusing on that endowment tax? Should we be focusing on the income tax on the private foundation? What about opposing the expanded authority for the Secretary of Treasury to designate an organization as a terrorist organization? Are there more, Jen? I see only four up here. I think I had them all on there.
Yeah, they're all there. You might have to scroll or open
Oh,
your
okay.
window a little bit more.
Okay, so if you scroll down, thank you, Jen, for that. Um, and then what about the limiting of the value of the itemized deduction to 35%? So that top tier 37% taxpayer can only deduct up to 35%. Increase in unrelated business taxable income for transportation and parking fringe benefits. Treatment of name and logo royalties as unrelated business taxable income. This was again, I thought it was more directed at colleges, universities, but I think it also can expand to like museums. And then the expansion of the tax on excess compensation to apply to all employees. So again, please vote because I have a meeting next week with the Government Relations Committee. I would love to bring this data back to them and say I had a large group on the Stelter webinar, so please vote. So Jen, you can run it from here, and I'd love to see the results.
Yeah, we have about 53% of the attendees who have voted so far, and it's still climbing. So we're going to give you a couple more seconds to go ahead and get your vote in there. I know there's a lot of choices and a lot to read there and think about. So we'll just give you maybe 10 more seconds. We're up to about 63% of participants who have voted. Try to get that up just a little bit higher.
Yeah, again, we're looking at like the top 3 to 4 uh, items on this list to really advocate for you, for the nonprofit industry in Washington. As you know, there's still time to work with the senators here on Capitol Hill. And so, what can we do for you? That's what I want to know. How can I help you? How can CGP help you? Our Government Relations Committee. So please, please vote. I would love to hear from you.
Okay, we're slowing down. We have about 75% who voted. So I'm going to go ahead and end the poll.
Okay.
And we will launch the results here. If I can get to that. Okay, you should be able to see the results. Are you able to see them, Lynn?
I am not able to receive them, but if you see them, Jen, go ahead and tell everyone what the results are.
Yeah, I have to scroll down. Looks like the top one with 33% voting was the non-itemizer charitable deduction.
Okay.
The second highest vote getter was to oppose the expanded authority for the Secretary of Treasury to designate an organization as a terrorist supporting organization.
Okay.
And the third top with 16% voting was the net investment income tax on colleges and universities.
Okay. That is actually what I have been seeing out. Oh, now I see the poll.
Oh,
Thank you.
there we go. Yep.
So thank you for that. I have given this presentation twice, once to the Western Regional Plan Giving Conference just last week and once to the Mid-Iowa just yesterday. And I am seeing the same top three, the non-itemizer deduction, the Secretary Treasury, and the endowment. So it seems pretty strong that those are the top three issues that are on nonprofit individuals' minds. So thank you for that. I appreciate that. So we're going to move forward here. I just want to give you a time frame, the proposed legislative timeline on this. So it moved through the House in mid-May, and then the House passed it just last week by a very slim margin, 215 to 214. In late May, so now it moves on to the Senate. So we've got late May and into June. The Senate will review, they'll vote. I know that there's discussions over some hot topics like Medicaid and the debt ceiling, some energy credits, things like that. The goal for Congress is to have it on President Trump's desk and signed into law on the 4th of July. So that's the time frame that we're looking at. We'll see as it moves, obviously there's a lot of give and take. So we'll see how that actually moves through. Oh. Okay. Whoops. Somehow I got way off base here. Let's see here. Okay, let's go back here. Okay. Now there's some proposed legislation that is not in the current bill, but I did want to bring your attention to, and it's called the IRA Charitable Rollover Facilitation and Enhancement Act. What this does, so right now, QCD, let's talk about QCDs. QCDs have been increasing in popularity. They are a great gift for seniors. But this act would allow individuals, IRA owners, 70 and a half and older, to use their QCDs to fund their DAF. Okay. Right now, that is not allowed under the legislation. Okay. Because there's text in there. It says it prohibits QCDs to any fund or account described in section 4966, which is the DAF section. So it was introduced on April 10th with sizable bipartisan support. It basically just deletes the exclusionary clause. So the legislative fix is simple and straightforward to allow individuals, QCDs, to fund DAVs. Now, it's not going to be part of this bill, but I do think it could be part of a larger retirement package in 2026. So that's the time frame on that one. So what I'm hearing from the nonprofit sector is twofold. On one side of the coin, nonprofits will say, oh, well, it expands options for giving for individuals 70 and a half and older. I talk with these individuals. They ask me the question, can I make a QCD to fund my DAF? And the answer is no. And this would allow, one more option for seniors. And it unlocks new funds for charitable organizations. And so that's on one side of the coin. The other side of the coin, what some nonprofits are saying, well, hold it. We don't want to be sending QCDs to DAFs and then recommending grants from DAFs. It could potentially slower those distributions. Now, some individuals will say, oh, well, that will change if DAFs actually have a minimum payout. Not sure about that one because right now payouts are actually pretty high at about 20%. If they say, oh, minimum payout at 5%, will people then just pay out 5%? So this one's having kind of mixed reviews, and think, to yourself of what you think of it. But this is out there. It has bipartisan support, and we may see it come around, I would think, next year. So the second part of the variables that are influencing nonprofits and philanthropy in 2025 are the executive actions, right? So these are the executive orders and policy on the nonprofit community. So what we're seeing is that the executive orders affecting nonprofits really fall into some larger categories here. And I will say this, that the National Council of Nonprofits has done an excellent job on really tracking these executive orders. So about 152 executive orders have been signed since January 20th. And they're really coming into, basically these 5 areas. So DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, federal funding, immigration, environment, and civic engagement. The National Council of Nonprofits have given on their website provides an outline of of all the executive actions that are impacting nonprofits, their status, where they've been, whether there's been a court action or not. They have done a wonderful job, and I really recommend going to their site if you're trying to track legislation, because they do update that regularly. So use that as a resource for you. So we know that federal funding is vital for the nonprofit sector. So here's just some statistics. An estimated 33% of nonprofit sector revenue comes from government funding. 303 billion in government grants is distributed annually across more than 100,000 nonprofits. About 30% of nonprofits filing a 990 are receiving federal, state, or local grants, and more than 35,000 nonprofits rely on government grants for over 50% of their revenue. So federal funding is certainly impactful and for many nonprofits. And so what we're seeing from the nonprofit sector is really kind of a mix. So there's certainly lobbying efforts going on. And I'm certainly, as I said, I'm on the government relations committee. So we are lobbying for you on a number of like tax provisions and things like that. There's judicial advocacy. There's been a number of lawsuits filed against these executive actions, like that are freezing funds or eliminating agencies or departments or things like that. Diversifying funding. I know Nathan actually had a blog on this, that when maybe some funding has dried up for your organization from federal level, maybe you look to other sources. Maybe you're looking to private foundations. Maybe you're looking to corporations. Maybe you're expanding your plan giving efforts and talking with your donors about it. So strengthening community networks is certainly, and then I also, or a number of them are just staying informed, like being on this webinar today, and there's others out there too, and kind of taking a wait and see approach. Like, we're just going to kind of wait and see how this is all going to move forward, what the courts are going to say, things like that. So there has been a couple wins for nonprofits. So for example, 2 federal judges have granted the National Council of Nonprofits and a co-plaintiff's motion for a nationwide preliminary injunctions. This has now barred the administration from freezing, halting, or pausing funding awarded under like the Inflation Reduction Act, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, and federal grant disbursements. The judge also ordered the administration to immediately resume processing and distributing the funds and release all funding already appropriated by Congress. Now, while we have that on our side, what I'm also hearing from the sector is that these funds are still not getting to the nonprofits, and they're still waiting, and they really haven't heard anything. This is from I've given this presentation live and I've polled the audience, and while the funding is supposed to restart, it really hasn't yet, and they're getting mixed messages. So that's what I'm kind of hearing from the nonprofit sector. So please know that judicial advocacy is something that that nonprofits can rely on. Just another statistic here, according to the Policy of Integrity at New York University School of Law, found that the current administration has lost about 79 of the 85 cases involving federal agencies on deregulatory or policy issues. So know that the courts are there if you need to, and for the National Council of Nonprofits and there are advocacy groups supporting the nonprofit sector. I will also, if you do receive funding for your organization, federal funding, the National Council of Nonprofits has created a checklist for nonprofits, and I do think it's very well done, and it's outside of the scope of this presentation, but I do want to just let you know that it's a resource out there, and it walks you through several steps of what you can do if your funding has been impacted. And so it's available on their website. Just you can Google it. It should come up. If you have any problems, you can certainly email me and I will send you the link directly. Now, what we've found at Stelter is that many of the executive actions are impacting various sectors differently, from international affairs and human services to arts and culture, health and education. So, we're going to look at that a little bit and take a deeper dive into that. So, the international affairs community, of course, it had the elimination of U.S. aid, current administration rescinding or freezing promised federal funds, and so nonprofits are reliant on those funds are having to pivot. And what does that pivoting look like? Court has issued a number of injunctions, but the funds haven't necessarily restarted. So international affairs, I think, has been hit quite hard, especially with the loss of jobs. According to the Chronicle of Philanthropy, about over 14,000 jobs were lost in the nonprofit sector, and about 4,300 of that were international affairs jobs. So there's been when I have done this presentation before, I hear about halts in programs and development projects and humanitarian aid that has been lost. So really, there's been strategic shift between, and diversifying funding and shift towarding maybe private sector models. Of course, increasing your planned giving efforts and your gift planning, and reaching out to donors, right? And letting them know your messaging may have to pivot during this time. So, how are nonprofits responding in the international affairs? And this includes the many human services organizations as well. Well, a number of things. They're building coalitions and advocating for themselves. They're strengthening local partnerships. They're filing petitions with the courts. They're adjusting their marketing materials to appeal to donors, maybe for stopgap funding without, and without alienating government or potential diverse donors. So sometimes they're walking that fine line. Or maybe they're placing an emergency call to donors. The International Rescue Committee took out a full-page ad in the New York Times pleading to donors to come forward to help them. Arts and culture, there was a move to eliminate the Institute of Museum and Library Science. Just so you know, a federal judge has stepped in and issued an injunction on that on May 6th. But at the same time, museums and libraries are dependent on this money. And from what I'm understanding, this money hasn't started moving forward again. So in 2024, the IMLS awarded over $266 million in grant-making research and policy development to support and empower museums and libraries and related organizations. So there has been, from what I'm hearing, potential loss of nonprofit jobs and program disruptions. Like, somebody told me, well, their bookmobile program had to be eliminated, things like that. Other programs being eliminated. So you need to start looking at other ways, where can you get those philanthropic dollars? And maybe that's through private foundations, again, corporations, reaching out to donors for appeal on that. So really talk with your donors about it. And this is not a time to fall silent on your communications. This is a time to really ramp up your stewardship and if you're in the arts and culture sector, the importance of your sector and whether it's the arts or culture or museums or whatever it is, that how important it is to your communities. And hopefully your donors will step up to that. Healthcare. So what I'm seeing here, National Institutes of Health and research funding reductions are affecting hospitals, cancer centers, academic medical centers. Medicare, Medicaid. So this is a hot topic in this bill of how much Medicaid is going to be cut. And so those are impacting hospital margins. And how is that going to trickle down? Is that going to trickle down to like the plan giving office? We haven't seen that yet at all. And it could have happened, but we aren't seeing that with our Stelter clients so far that we know of. But with those cuts, we see, there could be funding reduction, but others are proceeding with planned budget increases. So we're seeing kind of a mix here, but we'll see what happens with Medicaid and things like that, and how it will impact hospitals. Education. So, of course, we talked about the excise tax on university endowments as being, well, let's see, the third concern for this group. So we have that, and then the elimination of the Department of Education. Now, that executive order was signed on March 20th, but the court blocked that on May 22nd. So we're kind of in flux here of where that is at right now. But the federal funding and research cuts, the National Institutes of Health have had to terminate grants. University of Illinois, for example, their soybean innovation lab shut down on April 15th after USAID cuts. That left about 30 jobs lost in this sector. And of course, many DEI programs are being either dismantled or reviewed or revised. So what we're seeing, so from the donor perspective, and this is reflected on Stelter survey comments, is that there's a lot of donors that express dissatisfaction over the dismantling or cessation of DEI focused programs. So you have those donors, but you could have donors on the other side that also say, well, that's a good thing. So those in the education field are walking a tight line, and they've got donors, who have obviously different opinions. Financial aid concerns. So this was related to the Department of Education. So how are financial aids going to be continued and managed without the Department of Education? But the courts have stepped in now, so that's in an uncertain time right now. And then, of course, the endowment tax implications. If they're paying higher taxes, this may, of course, limit funds available for scholarships and other programs for the colleges and universities. So a couple things here. So what I hear about the DEI initiatives is that they are looking at their marketing material, their websites, maybe not saying DEI, but their values are always remaining the same, and the work continues. And so for one example, a university rebranded its Office of Diversity Inclusion to the Office of Cultural Intelligence. So we have examples like that. Now, another university, I was told, was not renewing some non-tenured faculty contracts to pay for some legal expenses associated. And one big concern is about the international students. And so one university in the Midwest, and I'm sure there's others across the country, of losing international students along with their tuition, right? And what is that going to look like? So Harvard's been in the news lately. I'm sure you've heard about it, but they have taken a stand and have won on at least one occasion. So the court did issue Harvard's restraining order against the Trump administration as it related to the international students on May 23rd. But it's really defending the faculty research, freedom of or academic freedom, and programs under scrutiny. So that's all out there as well, and we'll see how that plays out too. So another poll here. I'm curious, has your organization been impacted by the recent executive actions? Yes or no? I'm curious to know how many of you have been impacted by whether it's federal funding freezes or loss of grants or anything like that. Please let me know so I can advocate for you as I work on the CGP Government Relations Committee and elsewhere. Again, has your organization been impacted by the recent executive actions? Yes or no?
We're at about 62% of our attendees that have voted, and it's still climbing quickly. So we're going to go ahead
Okay,
and leave this open for just a little bit.
that sounds good. Yes, please vote. I would love to hear from you.
Okay, looks like we're stalling out. We're at about 74%. So I'm going to go ahead
Okay,
and end the poll, and I will try to share this with you better this time.
that's okay.
Um, yeah, so can you, here we go, share the results.
Okay. So yes. So an overwhelming majority of you have been impacted by the executive action, 71%. About 29% have not been impacted. Thank you so much for voting. I really appreciate that. I will bring that information to my next meetings going forward. Okay, let's see if I can get back to. So the one change that's impacting nonprofits across all sectors is some changes in the U.S. Postal Service. And you may have heard in the news, I mean, they are reducing workforce. They're closing some distribution centers. So that may give you some anxiety and say, oh no, what about my print? Is my print going to get there on time in time for the holiday or whatever it is? The nonprofit industry accounts for about 10% of all mail volume in the US. So it is substantial. So I did want to bring this to your attention. But I don't see the changes that are happening with the reduced workforce and the distribution centers changing the delivery time. So I don't think you're going to have to worry about that. What you should be mindful of is that there is going to be an increase in discounted nonprofit mailing rates from 22 to 24% effective July 13th. This is a 9% increase, which is slightly higher than the 7 to 8% increase over the last 4 years. So if you do have a summer mailing, mail it before July 13th. You'll pay a little less in postage, and that adds up, especially if you're a larger organization mailing out to thousands of donors. So don't let any price increase derail your marketing efforts. So I just want to say here, make sure you're always reviewing your list. And that's best practice across the board. You always want to be reviewing your list to make sure that they're accurate and up to date. And then if you want, if it is going to be a significant impact for you, certainly take advantage of the lower rates now, but also email, social media, digital platforms. You want a multi-channel marketing process anyway. So if you're only mailing, think about the email, the social media, or the digital platforms, and use data to gain more insights into your donors. So again, diversify fundraising channels and advocate for nonprofit protections. So, certainly we want to make sure that the discounts for nonprofits continue. It looks like they will. There's just a little bit of a price increase for mailing. So tracking the economy now, key drivers to donor behavior. So now let's take a look at the donors who you're asking to maybe step up during this time. What are they thinking and what are they looking at? Well, stock market performance, inflation, consumer confidence are all big key drivers in how donors are feeling. So it's no data has shown across the board that when the stock market is strong, giving increases. We have seen that over and over and over and again. And when market downturns happen, well, there could be, hesitation or maybe shifting gifts from outright gifts to deferred strategies. So the stock market is certainly something that your donors are paying attention to. Other items that they're paying attention to, inflation, right? The cost of eggs, the cost of gas, we always hear it. Consumer confidence, what about salaries and things like that? So, so this is something that's a lot of times in the news and they're paying attention in the media and things like that. So certainly inflation and consumer confidence are on your donors' minds. So let's take a look at where we're at now. The stock market for the year has been up. It's been pretty well. We've had some roller coasters, that's for sure. So we've had some significant ups and downs, but for right now, the S&P is up about 0.87% for the year, and the Dow Jones is down about 0.17 for the year. So we got a little mix there. Inflation is about 2.3%, and that's down from 2.9%. So that's a good thing from 2024. But consumer confidence, that declined to a 13-year low. And really, I think that that's still over the tariffs and the on again and off again of that. And then inflation too. And even though inflation has come down, I think it's still people still see the price of eggs and other things that they're paying a much higher price for. So I borrowed this from my friends at PG Calc. So thank you to PG Calc for this. But please know that, when you look at the stock market, a lot of your donors have been in the market for a very long time. There's gains in that market, absolutely, even though it's been pretty neutral for the most part this year. And so you see, Black Monday back in 87, giving decreased, but then it increased afterwards. And so it rebounded. And then the 9/11 attacks, giving decrease, and then it rebounded. And then you had the Great Recession, and then it rebounded. So you see this, and I think, donors, they may be hesitant and may turn to more deferred gift strategies during this time, but then we'll come back, as you see in this chart, to giving outright. So I always have homework. How can your nonprofit lead through this change? Well, we can apply some lessons from the recession and COVID. We know at Stelter that strong, sustained gift planning programs lead to long-term success. So now is not the time to pull back. Communicate to your donors. It's not the time to fall silent. Call them, email, text, set up a luncheon, a coffee, whatever it is. And adapt a strategic communication plan and follow it. You don't want to, and I think in today's blog, Stelter's blog today, that, you want to create a strategic plan and a marketing plan and really stick to it. And again, stewardship always remains important. You may have to pivot your messaging, recognize that maybe there's some uncertainty, but keep focused on your mission and your impact. So strengthen your messaging around impact, trust, and donor intent. Other things, maintain personal contact, even that's a phone call or video call. Promote proven gift vehicles. So you may have to switch a little bit to maybe deferred giving strategies like gifts and wills or percentage beneficiary designations. DAFs and QCDs, the money's already there, right? So DAFs, the money can't go anywhere else other than a charity. And QCDs, there's certainly a trillions of dollars set aside in IRAs. Life income gifts, some people may be a little tired of this little roller coaster ride in the stock market. So gift annuities is a perfect option for fixed income, right? And charitable remainder trust, same thing. I mean, they could do an annuity trust or a unit trust, but it provides lifetime income. Become a CGP advocate. So we need you if you are looking to get involved in advocacy. Please sign on here. I've got the link there, and that may include signing on to a letter or joining a virtual Hill meeting or something. But we are looking for advocates. Other ways you can advocate. The National Council on Nonprofits has a national letter. You need to sign it by June 2nd. If you're interested, there's the link to it. Or contact your congressional representatives and share your story. How is your nonprofit being impacted by whether it's tax policy or executive actions? Become an active fundraiser. If you haven't put your own plan gift in place, please do so. You know that it's easy to do. And you can do it in your retirement plan in probably less than 10 minutes online. Continue being not only an advocate, but educating yourself. Join your local plan giving council. Attend the next CGP advocacy update that is on June 2nd. Or June 12th, 2025. You can go to their website. And the CGP conference in Indianapolis always provides a great time for networking and educational material. That is later in the year in October. I always want to mention this. I love to see signature lines that are promoting your website. And so if you look at your signature line, if you're not promoting plan giving as part of your signature line, I suggest you do so. It's easy to do. You can highlight it like I do here, link to your website. And then lost legacies. I'm sorry, I'm right at time here. But if you may have lost legacies out there, and items that have gone unclaimed and are sitting with your state treasurer. You need to go to your state's unclaimed property site, put in your nonprofit's legal name, and you can do it for your own self too, and see if there's any funds that rightfully belong to your organization. I have heard story after story after I've highlighted this, that organizations are finding 30 claims, 17 claims, whatever. A lot of them are insignificant, but there are also significant claims like life insurance policies and bank accounts out there. So please go to your state's unclaimed property site or go to missingmoney.com and find hidden treasure for your organization. Thank you so much. I'm a minute over. I didn't allow for questions, but I'm willing to stay on if there's some hot questions going on there. Thank you,
Uh,
Jen.
Sure. I'll go ahead and ask the top two that got the most votes. The first one is, have you heard anything about extending the ability to fund a CGA through your IRA so that this is every year, not just once?
Oh, no, I haven't, but that would be another one to advocate for. No, it's still a one-time election, and I have heard of no um discussion in Washington at this point of making that like an annual um something that's available annually.
Okay. And then the next one that had the top highest votes. Under the Constitution, are organizations entitled to due process?
Yes, yes, organizations are entitled to due process. So that is something, as judicial advocacy, and a number of them have signed on and are using that judicial advocacy process.
Great. Well, we can't get to all of the rest of the questions because we are out of time. We want to respect your time, but Lynn has offered to answer your questions if you email her personally. Her email address is on the screen. It's her name, lynn.gaumer@stelter.com. Also, if you'd like more information about Stelter and what we do or our webinar series, you can visit us at stelter.com. You can email Stella at stelter.com. You can email Nathan at stelter.com, or you can email me, Jen Ellen at stelter.com. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here today. Oh, also, you get the recording and the PowerPoint tomorrow. I'll send you an email with the link to that. And thank you so much for joining us for the last hour. And Lynn, thank you so much for your expertise on this very important topic.
Thank you for the opportunity. Take
Great.
care, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good afternoon. Bye-bye.